I think, I don't know, I'll assume we're streaming. So welcome everybody to Jewish Wisdom for Coping with the Pandemic. Today we will be focusing on the soul trait of equanimity. For right now, as is our custom, we will begin with a short meditation to help us become present, to create a sacred space where we can leave behind the outside world for this next hour and get in touch with our inner selves. So please, please get comfortable in your seat and close your eyes. And take in a deep breath through the nose and hold. And exhale through the mouth and hold. And again, inhale through the nose and hold. And exhale through the mouth and hold. And as you're inhaling, imagine yourself floating in the ocean and a big wave comes along. And as you inhale, you rise up in the water. And as you exhale, you sink back down again. So inhale up with the wave, exhale back down again. Feel the rhythm of the sea, bringing you up and bringing you down. You're just relaxing and floating, being there in the water. And while you're visualizing this, if thoughts should come into your head, just observe them and let them pass, like a cloud floating by in the sky. Right now, all you need to do is rise up and down as the waves approach the shore. And on your next inhale, say to yourself, Shema. And on the exhale, listen. Shema, listen. In Shema, we're listening deeply, without judgment, without offering advice. In Shema, we are listening with an open heart. Shema, listen. Well, friends, as we're getting ready to begin our exploration of equanimity, I'm curious just in the chat if you maybe could just type in a word or two. Where are you right now? You know, coming out of the meditation, experiencing the rise and fall of the waves. Where are you in your body right now? Calm and centered, relaxed and previously fatigued. So a lot of calm. Some tired. Wherever you are is okay. I have an interesting question I want to pose for us to begin today. I talked in my weekly email about rising above the good and the bad. And so it made me think, you know, here we are in a pandemic. does rising above the good apply? Or do we just want to grasp hold of anything we perceive as good? What do you think? Yeah, Joanne. You need to unmute. Joanne, can you unmute?
No, I was just thinking, I mean, I'm not sure what rising above the good means. I mean, enjoying something, is that rising above the good or just, and that could be equanimity also.
Yeah, it's a very good question to layer on top of the question. What does it even mean to rise above the good and the bad? It says rise above the good and the bad. Do not let them disturb your equanimity. And in the newsletter, I shared how a few weeks ago I sort of got this almost frantic giddiness. And then a few weeks later, I sort of had just kind of a calm, centered contentment. And I had very different sorts of reactions to, something that could have pushed my buttons, where in the one case, the button got pushed. And in the other case, it was like, okay, whatever. We'll just keep going. So that's one particular example, but nonetheless, does this change? Does this dynamic change? Because we're in a pandemic right now where there's a lot of stressors, there's a lot of isolation, a lot of death, a lot of illness. Does that change our relationship? Yeah, Jane.
I think it takes a lot of effort to focus on many different things. And I think it depends upon the moment, because that changes and our mood changes and our fatigue changes and our stress levels change. So I think it's like the ocean. And if there's a storm, it changes. If it's calm, it's peaceful, and all the way through the spectrum.
Thank you, Jane. Any other thoughts? Yeah, Bonnie. Remember to unmute, please. Bonnie, please unmute.
Here we go. Okay, thanks. Yeah, there's so much tumult right now. And Jane used the word storm. And I think that that's really true. Not just the pandemic, but also just before I arrived at this workshop, I was listening to the vote in Congress and what was going on with the QAnon representative and voting her out of a committee. And I think we all have to keep, I think, a good, healthy distance. Rising above is another way of saying it, from all the craziness that's going on, because it's a roller coaster. And one minute something good happens, and another minute something terrible happens, and you think the storm has passed because of an election, and then you find out it hasn't. And it's just, it can really make you crazy, and it can really get to you deep inside. So I think we have to find a way, whether it's meditation or whatever it is, to keep a little distance from all that's going on and keep some objectivity and try to keep our sanity that way.
Yeah, thank you, Bonnie. And so what I'm hearing is, in terms of this question about rising above the good, is there's a danger maybe in getting too caught up when there's like a little bit of good news, whether it's like something political or something about the pandemic or something just in our life, of being like, that's it, finally got it all figured out. We've turned the corner, great. And then inevitably something changes, and it can get, a big high can lead to a big low. And that's different than the sort of bobbing along sort of sensation that we were experiencing during our meditation earlier. Yeah, we go up, we go back down. We're not like body surfing and trying to, there was this one great beach that we went to in Hawaii once where I was, body surfing, and I had like the boogie boarding run of my life, where I I just nailed it perfectly. And like these two Hawaiian teenagers came up to me and they started speaking to me in Hawaiian pidgin because they thought I was a native. I mean, that's like how good I did. I was like, what did you say? And they're like, oh, so you did a very nice job, with that. But then like half an hour later, I got just slammed right into the, right on my head. And I'm lucky I didn't break my neck. And then I found out later on that all the guidebooks said, don't go to this beach because you can really injure yourself, So it's if you're playing in the really choppy water, you can have a lot of fun and you could get really injured, So it's different ways of approaching, approaching life, what waters do we want to be in and how much do we want to kind of paddle, all the time.
Mhm.
Shelley, were you going to say something? I see.
Well, today, I just kind of learned something about, people are on their own paths, and to truly be, the person that I'm emulating and, evolving to, is to recognize that I have to have patience and not, not try and force somebody to do something, but just let them be. And so, it's the same, with the news and stuff. I haven't been watching the news because I figure it's going to be there tomorrow or the next day, and there's going to be something else. And my belief is that, well, maybe instead of, if I can believe something positive, will come. So, I'm working from a different spectrum of trying to think of healing for everybody, and to get people into a healing space themselves. Right. So that's how I feel when I think of those waves and stuff, and you're crashing and stuff, and recognizing that I need patience to let everybody evolve the way they're supposed to.
Thank you. All right, let's look at a little more text here. Help us go a little bit deeper. So one thing, and welcome to some of the newcomers. And one of the things that we often do is we look at these 4 assumptions for the Mussar practice. And these are, for those of us who don't have a big background, these are 4 kind of ideas that if we assume they're true, they can kind of help us kind of navigate the Mussar practice as we learn as we go. So the one I was going to talk about was the idea that we all have free will, but it's not always accessible. And I think that's interesting because we can, when we're activated and triggered and when we're out of control, it's really hard to kind of pull in the free will. If my button gets pushed, then chances are I'm going to be saying things which maybe I don't want to say. But if we can cultivate this habit of just distance, and when we're not triggered, just thinking about that rise and that fall, it can actually strengthen our free will. It can help us navigate around, situations where we might become triggered. Again, where I didn't let myself get sort of too hyped up, after this last weekend, that just really tried to just enjoy kind of the satisfaction without kind of getting all hyper. And then I think that helped me, and that was a choice. That was a free will choice to, before things got too intense, to try to keep things level and even. Because once, we start going up on the roller coaster, there's nowhere to go but down. What do people think of that? Does that resonate, or does that seem kind of in left field? I can't see everyone, so feel free to just unmute yourself and chime in.
Hi, it's Jane. It makes me think about the differences between intellectually responding or emotionally responding, and what weighs more in in oneself when faced with different things, and what is attached to the situation or the event, and how do you problem solve. And it varies depending upon the level of importance.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's all kinds of things happen. And it's one of the things that makes me think of is how, something, the same thing in one circumstance might feel really, really important to me. And in another circumstance, it might be like the same exact thing. It might be like, well, it's really not that big a deal. And having that sort of level of discernment, like, is this really a life or death situation, or does it just feel like a life or death situation, Any other thoughts? Well, let's take a look at our spectrum of equanimity. And like all soul traits, having too much is, as bad as not having enough. So I think, as I tried to kind of get my head around this, when I first started thinking about equanimity, I thought it was kind of the same thing as being calm. But it's a little bit different. And so what is the danger of having too much equanimity?
Guess
You're not present. You're not being mindful if there's too much equanimity. You're like you're zoning out to protect yourself.
Yeah.
You go through your whole life, whatever, and aren't really engaged in your life.
Yeah.
Probably becoming what you've called complacent, not really going in any direction. And after listening to a webinar on Black history today, it makes me realize how complacent our country has been and how difficult it is to keep your equanimity when you're trying to react to something that we celebrate 1 month out of the year. And now it's in front of us throughout our life.
Right. So it sounds like that was, that was something which was very meaningful to you and told you something about your own,
My own
and your
balance.
own complacency, perhaps. And I don't say that to like single you out, but just as a general rule, it's, when we're sort of on the Mussar journey, we talk about like what resonates with us and what we're experiencing. And sometimes we kind of shorthand that by, saying, oh, well, it's like in general, this is an issue. When we really mean, it's like, yeah, this is kind of what I'm experiencing. Is that fair to say, Eileen?
Exactly. Only because it was brought into my world today. So I'm reacting to it. And I don't want to do it with hysteria, and I don't want to do it with ambivalence, and I don't want to be complacent. So it's, where are you on a given day when you react to a situation or a belief?
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. Anyone else have thoughts about how they sort of interact with the spectrum, or how things might?
I think that if you have too little equanimity, then you're one of the people that reacts on impulse to things. And so you're more likely to have, a visceral reaction, a temper outburst, or to have wild mood swings. And in that way, you're sort of unapproachable by others because they're never quite sure what they're going to get from you. And it interferes with your ability to, tikkun hatikkun alam, to bring some reparation to the world because you're in too much of a flux yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I thought you were going to say, and I think that was kind of implicit, is it also can kind of impact one's relationships with other people. It's sort of like, who, which Greg am I going to get today? Is it the one who's really fun to be around, or is it the one who's not? And
Absolutely. Yep.
Greg,
yeah, Lenny.
I don't know if I assume other people do, but on a daily basis, I feel like I'm really struggling with my equanimity. It's, I could be kind of going along and something can happen, somebody says something that is, not hurtful, but, annoying or whatever. And I just feel like I'm on that seesaw of trying to stay in balance. I mean, that's what I think of with equanimity, but I don't know if other people can relate to that.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Relate to it.
Absolutely. That's what it's all about, is we want to make that seesaw stop seesawing. And it's like Greg says in his book so well, it's separating that higher mind that's straight, narrow thinking from the lower one that's the flight or flight and totally dependent on what's going on around you. It's separating those two. So no matter what's going on around you, whatever outside stimulus, or even things within you, an inner struggle that you're having in response to what's going on, that in spite of that, you can just ride, just let it go, just let it go and ride over it, take a breath and let it pass. And it takes discipline and practice. It's not something that comes naturally. So that's why you're feeling that, Lenny, is because you have to be very mindful about it.
Mm-hmm. And I forget that. Thanks for the reminder.
And I think it's hard. I think it is. Yeah, absolutely. This is something that takes practice. I, like many people in the mindfulness space, they look to the Dalai Lama, who's really an incredible person, but he meditates 5 hours a day. It doesn't show up that way. I mean, he's also steeped in a very learned tradition, but he, really, so that's, like the Hall of Famer, right? That's
amazing.
Someone where we don't want to like start beating ourselves up because I struggle to meditate 5 minutes a day and this dude's meditating 5 hours a day. But it's also a reminder to us that with work, we can do better. And yes, Janet.
Let's see. Yeah, okay, I'm not muted. I've known people who have no stress or who sublimate it. And you know what? They don't accomplish much. I think ego drive is healthy. Question of balance.
Yeah.
In order to accomplish something, you've got to work through stress.
I think it depends on your perspective and what the issue is. For some people, it's much easier to deal with something than someone else. Their view of stress is different from my view. The consciousness is different. The insight and judgment is different.
Yourself, Jane? I'm curious.
What?
How do you approach this for yourself?
Well, I try to be balanced most of the time. I do that all the time at work. I'm working with people who have severe issues and helping staff. And I try to do the exercising. That's my more meditative quality. or the reading or the writing to help me process. And it's a balancing act. Some things are more important to me that might have me go on either side with that seesaw, but it depends on what I place. I think all these traits, it depends on a lot of stuff. And it takes a lot of practice. I've been practicing, I guess, self-control for a very long time.
Yeah, well, that's why we call Mussar practice, because it is something we practice. I think we've all are starting to kind of come to the place, well, how do we do this? Because this is like the, you know, like whenever I think of the quote about what is Mussar from Rabbi Lefin, it's teaching the heart what the head already knows. And we can all sit here and say, oh yeah, we just got to kind of, you know, be mellow and just kind of not get too worked up. But in every day, that's much harder to do. So there's this wonderful article. I'll share if you remind me at the end, I'll share the link in the chat. It was from Rabbi Rachel Barenblatt, who has a very popular blog, the Velveteen Rabbi. May I have someone read this, please?
I admire the ideal of equanimity, of responding to whatever arises from a place of centered acceptance and calm. As long as I do my best to be the kind of person I mean to be, to serve God and my communities in the ways I strive to serve, then that's what matters most. If I focus on my connection with something greater than myself, then I can handle things which seemed in my limited understanding to be good or bad with equal grace and presence. Rabbi Rachel Barenblatt, the Velveteen Rabbi. I love that.
Thank you, Joanne. Okay, so to the group, what is the point she's making here? What is it that she has found that helps her maintain equanimity?
Connecting to your higher power, or whatever, divine, whatever you call it.
Yeah. So what is it? And she sort of says, you know, whether that's God or it's something greater than herself. What do people think about that? Do you sort of think about connecting to something greater than yourself, and how do you do that?
There's some humility in there. They're saying, I'm not the biggest thing there is. Something about, I'm trying to get hold of what I'm trying to say, but of acknowledging that this is a smaller thing than it looks like to me.
Well, I think it's a change of perspective. I once did a role play. At the time, I guess I was following a guru, and I had to sit in a chair and be the guru. And I was like, oh, it was very different. You know, it's like a different view. It's almost like looking at yourself, observing yourself, doing whatever you're doing. To have that image of a higher power or, you know, something greater to, you know, that you're connected to, and getting maybe out of your, you know, emotional or whatever other reactions you might have otherwise had.
Thank you, Joanne. It almost sounds like you're saying that we can be our own higher power. We can sort of like look down and say, oh God, look, I'm sort of reacting in these ways.
Well, maybe.
Not completely, but Carrie.
I had a situation like that this week, where I had somebody overstep my boundary, and the reaction inside of me was to just let it go. But then I realized, well, this is something that's bothering me, and how did this person think that he did not affect my boundary? And I thought, obviously I'm not speaking out my boundaries. And so, you know, it kind of made me reflect. I'm like, where is this coming from? Like, what's the feeling that's associated with it? And, you know, I don't want to be like this anymore. I don't want to be somebody who just pushes it aside, you know, I want to be able to say, this is my boundary, and not feel like I'm hurting the person, you know, because people have that ability, right? So why couldn't I not? And so I did respond to that person, and, you know, and it, not meanly, I just said, you know, thanks for the chat, but there was a point where you overstepped. And, you know, so I did ask my higher self, I guess you could say.
Thank you. Carrie, you were going to make a comment too.
When I read the rabbi's the paragraph, my thought was that she steps outside of herself and takes a moment and looks at the whole system, the whole, you know, she sees more than just herself and her own feelings, and is connected to her community, her family, or whatever. So it's not just a one-sided vision. It's hard for me to explain, but I can see it in my head, but I don't have the words to do it.
You're doing fine.
That's the same way. That's the same way I felt, Carrie. I really focused on that word focus that she used. Focus on the connection. So no matter if the good or the bad comes, you're focused on the connection. It reminded me football game. I don't know why, but you know, when you see those football players and they make that one touchdown and then they just go all crazy about it. That's not what they are told to do, taught to do. It's actually, they lose the bigger picture, which is the entire game, not even the entire game, but the entire season, and not even the entire season, what they're really actually trying to do, their own expression, their own, what they're doing. You lose that. And then I was also thinking about being a grant writer, I have to carry a little banner, a little sign that says, remember equanimity. If I don't, then when we win the grant, then the whole board and the director just get so happy about getting this money. And that's not what it's about. You have to go back to the program and what you're doing and keep it in line with what you tell your grant maker. And then you can't stop there. It's like that teeter-totter you were talking about. You might be up, but you better straighten it out, because the next grant is right on my desk, you know. So I have to carry the sign around, and that's what I'm doing.
Thank you, Wendy.
I want to go back to what Shelley said about the boundaries issue. I can see another Mussar trait coming in there, in that you have way too much patience. So you have so much patience that, you know, you're allowing people to, you know, come into your space and you know, step over that. So I can hear that you're coming the other way and showing a little bit more of advocating for yourself, and that's a good thing.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. I have another text which I thought was a really interesting companion to this one. And maybe we can have someone else read the second text here.
I'll read it. The song of the birds as they perch in the trees, the sweet smells of lilies and the fruit of God's garden return one's mind to its natural state. And that's Rabbi Abraham Isaac Kook, Within the Heart by Mind by Alan Marinis. That's very appropriate because, well, we're in the Shabbat here talking about the trees, the Tu B'Shabbat, and so it fits in that with the trees.
Thank you. Yes, that's right. It's very, very seasonal. But it's almost like he's painting a picture. What's the picture he's painting?
These are tools to be at peace, that gives you a warm, comforting feeling, that takes you out of yourself to just be in the moment and appreciate what's around you.
And specifically the natural things around you. Not anything that humans created, but things that nature created. The birds singing, the trees, the smell of flowers, fruit. There's a real calm to that, to being in a natural environment.
And that's why I love the Botanic Garden. Because that's what happens. It takes over, natural setting.
I think though that he was saying if you go out and you interact with nature or you observe, you are reminded that you are nature, that you are a part of it. And the calmness you feel is because you are not separate from nature. You don't just see yourself, you see the universe, or feel the universe, feel the completeness of the amazingness of what life is. It's not just us, it's everything. And at least that's what happens to me when I go for a walk, or when I go out, and I go out every day, is I remind myself that I'm a small part of this huge big picture.
Yeah.
And connect with it. And it's humbling, and it helps me gain perspective in everything
That's why going
else.
to the ocean is so great. You see where you are in relation to the universe. That's what's so great about California, I think, and lots of other places too. But nature is so big here. The Pacific is so big. The redwood trees are so big. It really gives you a sense of proportion of people to nature in a way that I never had when I lived back east, or never really thought about. But it's true, it gives you a good perspective on who we are in relation to the universe.
And that's humbling.
Yeah, it brings in the humility, knowing your right place to occupy, and it brings in honor as well, to know that you have that divine spark as part of the universe. The universe would not be what it is if each one of us weren't a part of that. It would be something different. So even though we're a small part of it, we're all essential.
Yes, I was just going back and looking at the text of Rabbi Barenblatz, and she's saying, if I focus on my connection with something greater than myself, it's like it's something we are connected to. It's not something that we're separate from. Eckhart Tolle, who's one of my favorite teachers of equanimity, he gave this great talk where he's like, well, you can think of, a wave on the ocean, and maybe if the wave is starting to worry about, am I bigger than the other wave? Is this other wave have more people looking at it? And then, then you say, well, we're both part of the ocean, so there's really no difference between the waves. It's kind of silly for a molecule of water to become jealous of a different molecule of water. They're both water. And so in as much as what I'm hearing from everyone is, when we go into nature, we are literally situating ourselves as part of something greater. We have we have situated ourselves as part of something greater. So they've actually done studies where people's blood pressure just naturally goes down when you go into nature. There's something like that's where we evolved. There's something we resonate with about being in nature. Okay, let me just take a peek ahead here. I think we're going to go to our, we're going to do our breakout groups now. So let me share the prompt. Okay, so with your partner, whoops, what did I do here? Can you still see the screen? Did I stop sharing?
Yeah. Surf the wave.
Share screen.
Here we go. Right. So our mantra, and that was one thing we talked about last week, was, you know, how helpful it can be to have a mantra. So I included it in the email and also here. I want to just talk about this mantra: surf the wave, don't get crushed by it or swept away. So when you're with your partner, do a bit of a check-in. And then maybe share, you know, and this is again confidential, and we're not giving each other advice or trying to fix. We're just doing some sacred listening. You know, what's maybe one part of your life that you'd like to surf a bit better? Either some place where you get a little bit too high, or another place you get a little bit too low. Where is it that some surfing can, you know, might be beneficial? Okay, so let me open the breakout rooms. Okay, and away we go. Bonnie, are you still here? Okay, good. All right, well, for those of you who've been watching live, I encourage you to, this is where we're going to stop the live broadcast. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to participate, please jump over to the American Mussar website and you can sign up for the email list, and then you'll get sent the Zoom link and the password for every week. Yeah, and so surf the wave, try not to get crushed by it or swept away. I don't know, maybe I'm not streaming. Hey everyone, welcome back. Tried to give everyone a little bit more time this week. It's a juicy topic. So I'm curious, what were some of the, if people got to sort of talk about maybe identifying something that they wanted to surf a little bit better. I'm curious what came up.
Well, Shelley and I were talking about, you know, having our mission, you know, and stepping into that, and we're taking something upon ourselves to reach out to people.
Way to go. So proud of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So in a sense, and do you think that relates at all to kind of what we were talking about with something greater than yourself?
Absolutely.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. I as I said to Joanne, I think we all have a purpose. And my passing of my friend a couple of weeks ago taught me that because I was, you know, asking the universe why, and I was, you know, doing a card, and a card fell out, and it was called Loved Ones, and the card, the gist of it was, your loved one has passed, but his angel wings are surrounding you, telling you to live life and be what you are to be, because you never know when it's your time. And so it was that, you know, that next, like, thank you for the direction, you know, and I'm willing, so use me how I'm to be used. Take.
Thank you, Shelley. Someone else have an insight that they had that they might like to share.
Self. Carol and I talked about about isolation and how to deal with it. and the lack of socialization and how we try to reach out to others during this time and connect to other people. And largely it's on Zoom kinds of things. That Carol said she takes lots of different classes and is in a choir and that kind of thing. And I thought that that was really great. And I find that, my time is really consumed by work, and I haven't really allowed myself to take time for myself. And I started out by saying, I feel like I'm losing all my social skills and don't know how to talk to people anymore. And even in an email, can't judge what kind of tone is coming across because I'm just not communicating with people as much as I used to. So that's a real, there's a real danger of that to watch out for and not get crushed or swept away by the isolation.
Yeah. Thank you. So trying to swim into like a pack of some other fish, or what?
Yeah, in whatever way we
There's a
can.
little extra effort right now. It just doesn't happen. There is no water cooler to talk to people. There's no person next to you in line to talk to, so it's very, very different. Thank you. Harry, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I was talking to Yonik up in Toronto, and I guess his surfing was a little bit. I went through the same process that he's going through now. He's preparing to downsize and also to retire, I guess. And I already
let Janos talk about his story, but what is your story?
Well, we talked about that was our common. I've already been there.
Okay.
I've already surfed that wave.
Right.
And so I guess we were sharing some thoughts about it, and he's almost there. And but it's an interesting time.
Yeah.
I find that actually how easy to make an awesome friend in half a minute, right? It clicks, it clicks.
Yeah.
Good to talk, Gary.
Absolutely.
Well, share your email addresses in the chat, stay in touch if you wish.
Okay.
Continue the conversation for sure if you're clicking. Eileen, was that your hand up or were you scratching your forehead? No, okay. Yeah, Karina.
Yeah. The thing that I talked about that helps me to keep my equanimity is journaling. Journaling is a good way to formulate thoughts and to respond in a way to think through different triggering episodes, things that could be upsetting or just things that have been happening. And I find them useful to look back at. I was telling Leni how I've been looking back at some of my journal entries from the beginning of the pandemic, and I'm finding there's some things that I was struggling with a year ago that I'm still struggling with a year later. But on the other hand, there are some things that I can see that I've made some, what I want to call progress in. And I'm definitely not at the place I thought I would be, because I didn't know a year ago that this was going to be continuing for so as it has, so journaling has been a really good way for me to remain focused and give me something to reflect on.
Thank you. Yeah, that sounds like a wonderful practice. And next year in school, I'll be doing some kind of chaplaincy internship, hospice or hospital, and I'm worried about it. It's like, how am I going to deal with all of this? And I've talked to a number of people who are currently either doing chaplains, doing internships, and a lot of them journal. A lot of them journal as a way of kind of processing, what's going on. So that is. Do you think that connects it all to this idea of connecting with something greater that we're talking about? Or do you think it's just a totally different approach?
I think it's absolutely connected. I kept thinking about years ago when I was at the music festival and we had like 3 religious services. I usually went to conservative. They had Orthodox, conservative, and Reform. And Ricky Blippitz is a rabbi, and she also sings. And but anyway, I got an Aliyah in the service, and when she said blessed me after it's like I felt like really blessed. I felt like this woman's really connected to the higher power or whatever. It was like so evident. It was like such a wonderful, uplifting thing. And so I say definitely connect with that when you're seeing patients or whatever your internship is.
Thank you. Thank you. Any last kind of thoughts, comments, or questions before we do our closing meditation? Yeah, Harry.
Yeah, equanimity is something I don't hear too often. And I decided to do a little research while you were doing while we were talking. And I came across something that I'm just going to share with everybody as a close on equanimity.
Okay.
It says equanimity happens to be more of a Buddhist philosophy. It was which you sort of mentioned before. But this person said, and this is what he said, equanimity is a protection from the 8 worldly winds: praise and blame, success and failure, pleasure and pain, fame and disrepute. Becoming attached to or excessively elated with success, praise, fame, or pleasure can be a setup for suffering when the winds of life change direction. For example, success can be wonderful, but if it leads to arrogance, we have more to lose in future challenges. Becoming personally, well, he's giving examples. If we understand or feel that our sense of inner well-being is independent of the 8 winds, we are most likely to remain on an even keel in their midst.
Nice.
That's awesome. What website did you get that from?
Well, I'll copy it. It happens to be a Buddhist thinker named Gil Frosdale. I'm going to copy it and I'll just put it on the.
Thank you.
Yeah, copy it or copy the link.
Everybody.
Yeah, that's wonderful. When we come
Like
sort of like where we started, rise above the good and the bad. If we get too attached to the good, when the wind changes, if my whole life centered around going to the office, not going to the office anymore, that's a setback.
So I'm going to send this to everybody, I guess, right?
Okay, great. Thank you. And remind me after we do this meditation, I'll put a link in the chat too. There was a very long, this Velveteen Rabbi blog post was very long. I just cut out one of the paragraphs and it's definitely worth a read, and we may revisit it again next week. So let's all once again close our eyes. And as we breathe in, let's imagine ourselves rising on the wave. As we exhale through the mouth, imagine us coming back down on the wave. Breathing in, rising up. Breathing out, coming back down. Now imagine as we're floating here up and down on the waves, we look around and we see the rest of our community. And sometimes when we're at the top of the wave, someone else is in the trough between the waves. And then when we're in the trough, someone else is partway up the wave. Someone else is a little higher up on the wave. We're all going up and down together. Feel that calm confidence of knowing that we're all floating in the same ocean. Whether we're at the peak or in the trough, we are not alone. When you're ready, you may open your eyes. Well, friends, thank you so much for being here. We will be back again next week. May you, whatever wave you decided you wanted to surf, may you surf it just a little bit better in this coming week. So thank you. I will